It's 7 o'clock Eastern Time. And to get us started this evening, I want to welcome you to the auction. My name is Frank Peterzak. I'm one of the auctioneers. And the first thing we'll do tonight to start things off is we'll get you underway with what an auction sounds like, let you have a flavor of that, and then we'll get into our webinar. So the first thing I'd like to do is sell you a piece of property. So let's sell you about 2.5 acres of vacant land. And it's nice and level. It's good to build on. You did your homework on it. You know what you're buying. And about 2.5 acres or so. Everybody likes it. What do you want to give on it here? Everybody give me about $25,000 for it. How about a $25,000? Everybody get 25. Everybody get 25. Who do give me $10,000? How about a 10? Everybody get 10. Everybody get 10,000. $10,000 on 2.5 acres. Would you give me 10,000? Who give me 5? 5,000, thank you now. Everybody goes 7,500. I got 5,000 here. Everybody goes $7,500 on. Everybody goes 75, and now 10. 75, did everybody get 10,000? 75, did everybody get 10? Everybody get $10,000. I got 10 here now. 12 and a half. How about a 12.5? Everybody get 12.5 and 15,000. How about a 15,000? Everybody get 15. I'm on this side. 12 and a half. Everybody get $15,000 on them. 12 and a half. 15. Thank you. 17.5. 17.5. Can you do it? I'll take 16,000. Thank you now. 17. Everybody get 17,000 and 18,000. 20,000. New player. Everybody get 21. You're both out. How about a 21? I got 20 here. Everybody get 21. Everybody get 21. Now 2. How about a 21 and 2? Everybody get 22,000. Everybody get 22. Now 3. How about a 23? Everybody get 3. 22 and a half. Now 23. Everybody get 23,000. I got 22 and a half and 23. 25,000. Thank you now. 26. 25. Did everybody get 26? Money wins. Everybody get 25. Did everybody get 26? 25 and 6,000. This way, $25,000. The high bidder's number is 443. 443, and my underbidder, 118. 118. Ladies and gentlemen, that's how we sell real property tax foreclosure property at the auction. It takes about 2 minutes to sell each tract, maybe 3 minutes, and that's when we move along. We can sell a couple of hundred a day, and we have. We'd like to welcome you to tonight's webinar. Again, my name is Frank Peterzak. I'm one of the auctioneers at Absolute Auction and Realty and at the NYSauctions.com team. Tonight with me behind the scenes, Jennifer Gableman, our principal broker and owner. She'll be working the backside and answering your questions as we go along. But keep in mind, we've done these seminars before. We anticipate a lot of your questions. In fact, that's what helped us put together the webinar. So if you just relax, listen to the information as we go, I'm sure we're going to cover almost everything you'd like to know tonight. This section this week is 2 parts. It's preparing for the auction yourself and then bidder strategy. We'd like to give you some strategies that you should take advantage of so that you can be a successful bidder at the auction. Now, just a couple of housekeeping things before we get underway. And let me make sure I can move it forward. Just a couple of things, housekeeping. One, if my image on your screen is in the way, you can just click and drag it someplace else so it's not in your way on the slideshow. If you want to type a question into the chat area, feel free to do so, but know that your question is going to be visible to everyone. We've planned for an hour tonight. And in testing, it's about 7 minutes or so, so we'll be right about on time. We will stay here longer if you have some questions that are pertinent to what we covered today. If we think we're going to be covering them in a future webinar, we're going to defer to that if we can, so we don't stay too much past the hour. We want to respect your time. And then after the webinar is over tonight, we have a really good free giveaway for you that our team has developed. We're the only company that has a down payment calculator. And that's one of the biggest questions we get at auction. How much money do I need to bring? What should the down payment be? Well, we worked very hard in the office to put together a down payment calculator. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. We're going to send you a free link to that webinar calculator. We're also going to send you a brief survey. Just a few questions, maybe 4 or 5 questions, asking for you to give us a review of how we did tonight and also to let us know maybe on how we can improve. All right. So let's look at the 2 parts for tonight's auction. The 2 parts that we're going to use is preparing for auction, how you should start to focus on a particular property or 2 out of everything that we're going to offer. Some of our auctions are 30 properties, 40 properties. We also have auctions that are 300, 400 properties. So clearly you're not buying everything, and you're going to want to start focusing on one or two parcels. A good question that comes up all the time is, what is it worth? And that's what the buyers are going to do at auction, determine that value. But before you bid, you might want to have an idea of what similar property is worth in that particular area. And we're going to cover some of that. What are zoning? What's zoning about? What are building codes? We'll get involved in some of that as things that you should be doing, again, prior to auction. And of course, we're going to talk about your ability to pay. Part 2 of today's auction is to give you a little more understanding on how you can be a successful bidder. You know, at auction, strength wins, and money strength is really what wins at the auction. The person that is the highest bidder, they're the winner, and they're going to own this property. And we'll give you some tips on how to do that. Now, whether you actually follow through or not, that's going to be up to you. But the strategy is meant to make you a strong bidder at the auction and let you buy property. We're also going to cover a couple of things that we offer when we offer property bidder's choice. What does that mean? What are we going to choose from? We're going to talk about combo or combination parcels, selling as one. And we'll also cover what it means when we talk about properties that may not have road frontage and what that is all about. So let's get right into this first. Let's get started. So there's so many properties available, not only with what our team brings to market each year, and we're bringing about 1,000 parcels to auction block across New York State, working with 15, 16 different municipalities, most of them counties, occasionally a small city and maybe an individual town. But out of New York State, 62 counties, there's still plenty of property for you to be able to investigate and purchase at auction. And how do you decide? So you're going to want to do some of the Google searches and looking for tax foreclosed property here in New York State. And certainly if you're part of our website, nysauctions.com or Absolute Auction Realty, the AAR auction site, you'll get an automatic notification. But what we're going to suggest you do is you start honing down onto one or two properties. It seems obvious, but real estate is local. It's wherever it is, and it's going to be impacted by the economic conditions, the viability of that community economically, any of the great enhancements. Maybe it's an arts community, maybe they're music, maybe they're known for restaurants, maybe it's very rural. You're going to want to start focusing on information that is very specific to local. And one of the things that you really want to begin focusing very carefully is looking for recently closed sales transactions near the subject property that you're looking at. What do we mean by closed? Closed meaning that that property at one point, hopefully recently, was for sale, and that a buyer came, a ready, willing, and able buyer came and had a meeting of the minds with the seller. And then they sat down and actually transferred title from the seller to the buyer in what we called a closed transaction. And how do you know it's closed? You'll see a deed to that property recorded in the county clerk's office. And you could actually go and take a look at that information. We discussed a little bit in a previous webinar how to do that. You're going to want to definitely make sure that you're comparing what you're looking at to a very similar property. We say compare it apples to apples, don't mix the fruit. If you're going to look at a single family residential property, it doesn't really help that you're looking then at multifamily in that area and trying to figure out what the pricing may be. You know, if you go to a professional person that's going to do an appraisal, they know how to look beyond an immediate neighborhood, because let's be honest, you may not find an exact duplicate sale right around the corner from that property, be it a single family home or a piece of land or commercial. So you may have to go a little bit beyond that immediate location and to try and find what we call a comparable sale. So professional appraisers know how to make adjustments, not only to different neighborhoods, but also to different towns, and they're able to come up with their appraised values. If you're looking at property, doing that initial drive-by, once you discover where the property is and what it is, and if it's suitable for you, you may want to see if there are some estimates that you can start getting now if it looks like it may need repair. And we're going to teach you how to go and get more information about these properties without you ever setting foot even inside the property. So you're going to want to start thinking about getting those estimates up front before you ever bid at the auction. And again, going back to the appraisal, you may actually want to consider paying for an appraisal or getting a local real estate agent that you can work with and have them help you determine values. There are a couple of things, though, that you can certainly do on your own to get more information. So again, looking at property that you see typically for sale, which are in a whole bunch of different publications and online and different websites, you really want to know, did that sell? Is there a new owner? So some of the sold sites that you may want to take a look at and get some information are some of the things that you could easily Google and find just like we did. Realtor.com, they have information that you could look for sold. Zillow, Trulia, Redfin. If you're working with a realtor, they'll have access to their local MLS, which is the multiple listing service, and they can find information there to help you understand comparable value. There's also a website called MLS.com, and you may want to go take a look at that separately. HomeLight, Realty Track, Property Shark, these are all websites. There are hundreds of real estate websites. To be honest with you, most of them seem to be very focused on for sale property. So not every one of them have links to sales data. And then, of course, some of the properties actually have paywalls where you're going to have to pay to get some more information. We're going to suggest that you keep poking around and looking for free information. It's available, it's out there, and you can look in the public record by looking at some of the sales history, by looking at recorded deeds, and seeing what property sold for. Not that the deed has a price, but on the cover of the deed is typically a recording page that talks about the transfer tax that was paid, and using the thumbnail view of $4 per thousand, you can take a look and multiply backwards and figure out what that price point would be. Publications, you might say, gee, why do I need a newspaper if I can do everything online? Well, one of the things that we heard from buyers over 20 years of doing this is, especially if they're an out-of-town buyer, is that they like to visit these properties typically when they have time on a weekend. Sunday's a really good day that they have free time to come and do this, and they're picking up the local newspaper on a Sunday that typically has most of the real estate advertising. Now, Sunday's, predominantly the real estate day in the classifieds, but if you're looking at certain newspapers, one off the top of my head, the Journal News, I think it's in Westchester, Thursday might be a better day there, not necessarily on the weekend. I know the Wall Street Journal, for example, has a couple of different days that they focus, residential and commercial. Again, that's either, I think it's Wednesday or Friday or Tuesday or Thursday. You're going to have to take a look at publications, see what the best days are. If you happen to stop at a diner or a supermarket in the local area that you're at, you want to look for things like Home and Land Magazine or Harmon Homes or Land and Trader. There's a bunch of, again, free publications that list for sale property, typically on your way out the store. They're in the wire racks, and you could just pick them up. I pick them up as I travel throughout New York State doing our work, and kind of read them at night before the auction, just so I get a good sense of, what are homes selling for here? What does it look to be? What are they asking for land? And it kind of just gives me some grounding on what the potential values are. I mentioned House Upstate magazine. This comes out of Kingston. It's the same people that publish, I think it's Chronogram, the arts magazine. And this is a large, oversized, glossy, really nicely produced. And they have property from Albany down into Westchester. So you can take a look at that. And they have all kinds of good articles and information for you that might be of interest. So what are you going to start looking at? Well, you want to make sure again that you're really comparing like properties. I just grabbed a few pictures off of the auctions that we did recently, and these are alike. In what sense? They're structures. They are habitable. They all are residential. Yeah, it seems like they all have a roof, and there's 4 sides, and they're here in New York. But what are they really alike? Can you make a determination of value just by looking at the photos and just looking out at these homes? You're probably going to need other sources, and that's what we showed you on that previous screen, how to start looking for single-family comparables. The next thing that you're going to want to do is look at your lot size. Here's some tax map cuts from our presentation and our catalogs. Are these all the same size? How close are they in size? And unless you really know the acreage or the actual foot dimensions of these properties, you're guessing. Here's what they really are. So that property on the left is 115 feet of road frontage by 93 feet off the road. And compared to the one just down below it at 4 o'clock, they're kind of similar in size, but wow, 162 acres. So when you're looking at tax maps, and especially tax map cuts, you're going to want to identify either the unit of measurement, or you're going to want to definitely go look further into the record, the assessor's report that we've talked about previously, to give you very specific information. So it's very important that you understand just how big that land is. It also becomes very important if you're looking at vacant land, because the size of that property relative to what we call zoning, and we're going to cover that, is going to let you know whether you can or cannot build on that property. So right here in the middle of the screen, 3 acres. In some parts of New York State, 3 acres is plenty to build not only one home, but many homes. You could potentially cut that up and put 3 or 4 homes on it, maybe more. In some parts of the state, 3 acres isn't even big enough to build on. They have 4-acre requirement, 5-acre requirement. So you're going to want to start making sure that you're aware of the lot size as you go then to get additional information. So looking at some of these properties and trying to get a handle on how you can start estimating costs of repairs. And again, these are some properties that we handled in this recent year, just last year. One of them actually had a window open in the back, and I was able to take a picture of this basement. The basement that looks like somebody put in some new support beams, and they had lolly columns holding it up, but clearly just a dirt floor. And that might be of interest to you, maybe not. Maybe you want more of a finished type of residential product. And then there are some multifamily homes for you to take a look at. When you're driving by, you're going to want to start figuring out, if you can, and then maybe in talking with some of the town officials, like building code enforcement officer. That's a good place to go, the building department. You may find out what is wrong with these homes. The one there on the lower right in Port Jervis, has caution tape on it. Why? Is it structurally sound? Does it have a problem with the flooring? Is there a lead paint issue there? You're going to want to talk to the building department. And then if they tip you off and they say, listen, the house is sound, everything is good, but the previous homeowner tried to do their own wiring and the electric panel's a disaster, you're going to have to get an electrician in there and change that panel, and then we can talk to you about giving you a certificate of occupancy. That's a really good piece of information. And it leads me to my first point when I'm directing you to ask supply houses to the trades for 1 or 2 names of likely people that you're going to employ down the road to either give you an estimate or do work. I learned this from talking to a couple of investors over the years who were looking at property literally hundreds of miles from where they lived and where they worked. And I said, like, how are you going to manage a renovation or a repair or rehabilitation of this property from a distance? And I've heard this more than once. They said, once we kind of figure out what we're buying and we know what we really need, if it needs electrical, we're going to an electrical supply. Not necessarily Lowe's and Home Depot, although they do have contractor desks, but they're going within the small village or the small town and they're finding the electrical supply to the trades and then visiting that store and saying, can you give me the name of one or two reliable or trustworthy people that can do work for me? And those supply houses, they have experience with people because they may be extending them credit. They know who pays their bills each month. They hear things within the industry of who does good work and maybe who doesn't. So, once they start recommending people to you, I would take that as a seriously good first step to hear, a couple of names, maybe ask for 2, 3 names. Years ago, my dad and I restored antique cars. We weren't in the antique body business, but we bought paint and sandpaper and supplies. We learned pretty quickly over the years, what the reputable body shops were in the area and who didn't do such good work. And now that I'm completely out of that business, we have our cars taken to, a body shop that we learned about and who does great work. So supply houses, great piece of information for you. If you're getting an estimate, it's always a good idea to get a written estimate. That's important. And then, at some point you're going to want to ask for insurance certificates to make sure that the people you're hiring are properly insured for being on your property and being able to do work. You also might want to ask them about references, satisfied references. And if you're an out-of-town person who's looking to do renovation at a distance, you may ask them for similar references. Have you worked with somebody out of town before? Because let's face it, if you're not the local person, you may think they're working on your house Monday and Tuesday, but meanwhile, they're over at another job. So, what is their reputation for working with people from a distance? And then all of the information that you get, it's very important that you actually follow up. Make those phone calls and ask good questions. So we're saying, ask a professional for advice. Not only here after this webinar and as you start looking at property, you should be looking at asking your attorney or tax professional for some additional advice on how you should go and prepare to buy these properties. But beyond that, also understand advice is not always free. So if you're looking to ask, other than public officials who are, working on the tax payment, they're not going to charge you for advice. But they're not necessarily giving you advice as much as factual information in the public record. But if you're going to go and visit an appraiser or maybe ask a real estate agent to help you, advice is not always free. And let's face it, sometimes free is not always the best anyway. So, we would suggest maybe make a good faith effort to engage with somebody in a professional relationship and pay them. So as you start going and looking at some of these properties, we're going to tell you that at auction, you need to ask the hard questions first. Auction is 180 degrees in a different direction from traditional real estate in this regard. At auction, when you're making the offer, that's the last step in the process. Your bid is the offer to buy. You already did all your homework. You already know everything you need to know. You're happy to make the offer to buy because at auction, you're the high bidder. You're going to be put immediately on a contract, a purchase and sale contract. And as long as you finish paying and the county approves you as the buyer, then you're going to own that property through a deed. So you're going to want to ask the hard questions first. You want to understand what zoning means. You want to know about building codes and building code violations. You're going to ask about well water, maybe septic or any public services. And then, of course, if it's of interest to you, you're going to want to know about the schools. So before we leave the slide, just want to point out these images for you that, if you visit a property and it has caution tape, there's a reason for it. So it was either put there by the municipal official who visited, or if our team is there and we visited the property and it looks like, you know, be careful underneath that porch, we may put some tape there for you. And please respect the tape. Don't trespass on the property and try and go inside unaccompanied by our showing team. So, you know, you definitely do not have permission to go into any of these properties unless it's part of our showing schedule and we're going to actually accompany you there. How that works out right now through the pandemic, we're not 100% sure, but rest assured we're going to do our best to make sure that we get to show property to you, or if not, we're going to go and view the property in such a way that we'll have extra photos and possibly video to share on the website. When you're visiting property, if you see a sticker on the window and it talks about violation information, there's a lot to learn on that orange sticker that that young woman is putting on a window. First of all, her name's probably on there along with contact information. So make note of that. You're going to want to find out, why did she put that sticker on the window? What is the violation? You know, if we see those stickers, we try and read them and see what they're about. And there's good information there. What's the date of the sticker? When were they there? And they also may have other information for you, even including, you know, the heading in the right direction to remedy. So if you see stickers affixed to windows, typically that's where they are. Make note of that information. The photo down on the bottom just, you know, makes me shake my head, but laugh a little bit. I had an uncle who was not an electrician, but this is the kind of work he did. And he almost burned my grandmother's house down. When he got done wiring things, you flick the switch, there were sparks coming out of the wall. And you definitely want to look for things like that as you're doing your inspection. That's clearly going to be a bit of a problem. So let's talk about the first one. Let's look into zoning and understand what zoning is about. So let me just back up 1 second. When you're looking at the sources of information that you're going to start inquiring to get information about these properties, on the county level, you're typically talking about money, about finances, about taxes. So on the county level, your questions are going to be about the taxes, like school, village, town. That's what they're really good at, especially in the Treasurer's Department. That's what they're going to be able to let you know, that finance commissioner. Yes, on the county level, there's a real property department. You might be able to go and look at a tax map there. You'll be able to look at a tax map there and probably look at some of that assessment information on the computer. And if there's a filed map, a survey map, there's likely to be able to see it there too. The county health department might be a good spot to go find out about a well or a septic system on a property. That's on a county level. When you start talking about how a property can be used, that's a local issue. County isn't going to determine how property can be used. That's going to be on the town or even the village level. And what they have are zoning codes or zoning laws or zoning regulations, depending on how the municipality describes them. And these dictate how a property can be used. Meaning, can it be residential? Can it be commercial, agricultural, recreational, or transport? Most of the time, you're not looking for roads or railroad beds. So how a property can be used is defined by zoning. They actually have maps that show you these different districts within that township where residential is primarily going to happen, where commercial or maybe mixed use, a mix of residential commercial. So zoning dictates how a property can be used. Their guiding rule of thumb is, you know, what is the community benefit? Is this an appropriate use of that land? You know, should a landfill go right next to a school? Not so sure about that. You know, should a power plant be built right next to a residential community? Again, not so sure about that. So the zoning law or zoning regulations will come about after a discussion on community benefit. This is municipal law. It's going to be local law. And, you know, if you have trouble understanding them, you may need to enlist either an attorney or maybe a surveyor or a public engineer. These people understand what these regulations mean and how to interpret them. The good news is many of them are online, so you can download them and then read them for yourself at home. Keep in mind, zoning laws can be modified, they can be suspended or appealed. And through the appeal process is the Zoning Board of Appeals. Let me just spend a second here. Why would they have zoning that's suspended? So here where I'm in Orange County, there are a lot of warehousing being built, some quite large, 1 million square feet or better. And some of those municipalities that have zoning regulations regarding that type of large structure are feeling a bit of overwhelming now that there are so many of these buildings being constructed. So you may find that a town suspends new approval process while they amend or change their zoning law. What's an example of appeal? What if you have a property that is 4.8 acres and you know that the reading of the zoning law says that you need to have 5 acres to build? That might be an appealable decline. You went to the building department and tried to apply for a building permit and they said, gee, you're short of the lot size requirement of 5 acres, so you are declined. There's nothing the building department can do about that, but they may send you to the Zoning Board of Appeals to have you petition them and see if they can give you a special use, or some other permission to develop that property. The next thing that you're going to want to do is understand building codes. So whereas the zoning law talked about the use of the property, now the building codes are going to be specific regulations regarding the design, construction, alteration, and then maintenance of structures. The overriding importance here is that health and safety and welfare of the building occupants is of prime concern. Health, safety, and welfare of building occupants. We've all heard about unfortunate things like, decks that had lots of people on them and the decks collapsed and people were injured. Was it a problem with the design, the construction, maybe the ongoing maintenance? Not really sure, but building codes are meant to make sure that there's building safety. Alteration, if you're looking at a structure and you're thinking, yeah, I like this, but I want to be able to take that wall out and I want to be able to do this with it, you're going to probably need to have a good conversation, not only with the building department, but possibly a public engineer, maybe an architect, to really see if you can do that. Part of my real estate instruction, I have a course on modular and manufactured housing for realtors and continuing ed credit. We talk a lot about altering those manufactured homes and what you really can and maybe can't do with them. So building codes come from 3 levels. They're on the federal level, they have what's called the HUD code. This is from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And it's a basic overview of what structures need to comply with in order to be residential, commercial, multifamily here in the United States, the HUD code. But nobody is building locally just to the HUD code. Here in New York State, you're going to have to build based on New York State building code, and then more importantly, your local building code. So as you work from federal to state to local, those building codes become more stringent. They become more determinate as to that design, that construction, the alteration, and the maintenance. Just off the top of your head, you might say, well, what does maintenance have to do with codes? One of the things we see as a maintenance issue, especially in some villages or cities, people that are not maintaining the grass cutting, or people that are not maintaining the snow shoveling, in the winter. They may have some rules or regulations that you need to clear the sidewalk in front of your property. So that would be a maintenance issue. Just one example. So local building codes are going to be the determinant of exactly what has to happen in what your improvement would be. As I was poking around the internet, I have a trivia question for you. Which state do you think has the strictest building codes? You can just type your answer in the chat box. Let me go take a look there and see what you think. Which state do you think has the strictest building codes? Yeah, I see people saying California. Yeah, California is probably a good answer, right? Earthquakes and all. Quite a few of you are typing in New York. I don't know if you mean that importantly. I'm hearing all kinds of states, and maybe you have experience with them, and there's good reason for you to say that. From what I saw in 2018, it's Florida. Florida has the strictest building code because of their frequent hurricanes. So they have to have structures that are not only roof design, but the sheer wall design and window design because of hurricanes. Now, maybe that's changed, I'm not sure, but 2018, that's what I found. You know, I'll just mention between upstate, where we work up in, you know, right up to the Canadian border, Franklin, Clinton County, out west towards Orleans County. But we do work in that real heavy snow belt, that Tug Hill area. I guarantee that the local building codes there on roof design are probably more determinant in what you need to do there to carry that snow load than a property maybe in Virginia or Alabama, you know, not seeing snow. You know, there are some statistics upstate that they get 120 to 140 inches of snow a year. You know, that's 12 feet or more snow. You could just imagine, you know, when it's light and fluffy and blowing, it's fun. But if it rains and freezes and rains and freezes, you have a tremendous amount of weight on the roof. And the local building code in those areas are definitely going to steer you in a direction to be safe in that property. So why don't we start talking about looking into properties? You're going to want to determine, again, either whether you're looking at vacant land or not, depending on where the land is. Is it very rural land? Is it semi-rural? Is it somewhat urban? You're going to start understanding that there are public and private services. Services meaning things like water service, sewer service, and are they totally public, totally private, or are they combined? And there are all types of things around New York State. Let me go on the municipal side for a minute, where we have public provided water systems. And typically you would then see a public provided sewer system. There may be underground gas service there. Now, gas service services the entire block or neighborhood or area. Generally speaking, municipality are going to find electric service pretty readily available. Stormwater collection. Is there curbing? Are there drains at the corners or along the side of the road? Are ditches maintained? Municipal infrastructure deals with those types of things. And you would expect that in a municipality setting that the availability of telephone and cable is pretty universal. As you get away from that urban or semi-urban rural area and you start crossing out more to the countryside, now you're finding more privately produced infrastructure. For example, a well so that you have water on the property. If you're looking at vacant land, one of the things that you're going to want to know is, has a well been developed on that property? We do see vacant land that has wellheads on them. And there's somebody dug a well contemplating a construction, and then they just didn't, they stopped. So if you see a well or you're thinking about putting a well there, a lot of good information you could find out about that property by visiting the health department on the county level. If there is a well there, there's a record of how deep that well is. Why is that important? Well, the depth of that well before they drilled and found water is going to determine how strong of a motor, how strong of a pump you're going to need to get the water out of the ground. So my well is about 130 feet. I have a neighbor's well, they're at about 75 feet. They didn't have to go too far for water. At the same time, I know of people that have wells that are 300 feet. Picture a football field down to find water. And you're going to need, a more powerful pump to draw that water out. What is the GPM of that well? The gallons per minute. How much water does that well actually produce? Again, looking in the public record at the county health department, possibly on the town level, they may have some of that information. You're going to understand how good that well may be. I grew up in a house that had 3.5 gallons per minute. And that was not a lot of fun when people wanted to shower more than one person at a time in the house. Not that we were in the same bathroom, but everybody using that water, and 1.5 gallons per minute in the upstairs shower and 1.5 gallons downstairs, help you get a glass of water. Good luck. And is it potable? Is the water that's in your well, is it drinkable? When I bought this home that I'm in now, it was a former apple orchard. So the water, looked clean. It was clear. We still had a water test done for apple orchard specific pesticides and farming materials, and make sure that the water is potable. Again, the county health records, very important. While you're there, if they have a well, they may have a septic field, and that septic field is another place that you can find information that will give you really good background. That septic field has to be designed and approved by the health department to meet the structure that is on that property. So is it a septic field, meaning that the gray matter and the effluent of that home goes into a holding tank and then out into sub-piping that just lets everything dissipate underground? You're going to want to know, how old is it? Has it been serviced? If you can find out a servicer who's been there, you might find out from them just how healthy and good that septic field is. Is there a cesspool? Don't be alarmed when you see cesspool in the public record. That means there's a tank there, typically. The days of the open cesspool, the open sewage in the yard, hard to find those anymore. Cesspool tank means that there's a holding tank where the gray matter of that house needs to be then pumped out. We occasionally see this lakefront property where there are no septic fields. There's not a lot of use of that property, so they use just holding tanks that then typically once or twice a year need to be pumped out. You may find some property, and we've seen them out in the countryside, especially for hunting cabins and whatnot, to have self-composting toilets. The ones outside, the privies that are outdoors, the outhouse, if you will, very different deal than this self-composting toilet, especially if it's fairly new. No odors, they work, and actually a lot of municipalities are getting hip to approving that type of item. Gas service, is that something that is above ground and delivered by a gas service provider, or does it have an underground storage tank? So you're talking typically liquid propane, and that could either be delivered or not. And that's an example of where the municipal service may or may not reach the property you're looking at. We have seen properties that have solar power. We have seen properties with wind power. In fact, one property we sold, we think most of the value was in that wind tower and the generator at the top of that tower. It was not a really big piece of property, but it sold for a lot of money. And that seemed to be what people were bidding on. Water power, I haven't really seen that yet, but it's certainly possible. And then you have satellite TV and internet available. In some rural settings, that's the only way to get those features. So whether it's totally municipal or totally private or a mix of the two, that's part of the homework that you're going to want to do prior to bidding at the auction, and make sure that you get that information. The school system, that might be something of interest to you. You may find that schools are, important to you, and you can look at the New York State website on that. And data, nyscd.gov. If you do a simple Google, you'll find that. Mainly, we're telling you, make sure you get your questions answered before bidding. Know that when you come to auction, when you bid, you're actually placing an offer to buy. It means that when you raise your hand at the auction, you actually want to buy that property. So be prepared, know that you're ready to bid and that you may be a buyer if you're the high bidder. So let's get into finances. Let's talk a little bit about that. Get your finances ready now. All auctions that we conduct are requiring a down payment be made immediately at the auction. Cash is still a great motivator. Cash is still king. Many of the terms say that they accept the terms of the rules of auction. The terms say they accept cash, and that's a good thing. They also accept a bank or teller check. We'll cover what that means. And then what are credit and debit card use? What is that about? Also know that after auction, you have to finish paying for this property in 30 days or less to close. That's meaning to transfer title to you. So 30 days after the auction. There are no contingencies in tax foreclosure auction, meaning you can't come up with a reason why you're not going to finish this transaction. There's no financing allowed. There's no post-inspection allowed. If we're able to show it to you, that's the inspection. You're not going to go back later and, bring your bank appraiser and be able to visit these properties. Absolutely not. And the main thing is there's no excuses. You've bid based on the terms of the auction, understanding that once you're the high bidder, you're going to finish paying and the property will be yours in 30 days or less. So this down payment calculator, the down payment that's required at auction, we've come up with this as a great tool for you to be able to use. And you're going to get a link to this calculator tonight after our seminar. You'll get a link to be able to do this, and you'll be able to determine based on which county and which municipality you are going to bid in for property, just exactly how much the down payment is. It's very simple to use. At the top, you're going to use a drop down to pick the county or municipality that you're interested in. You'll type in your bid amount, and then when you hit calculate, bingo. It tells you at the bottom your cash or bank check deposit amount and the credit card or debit card deposit amount. And this is the minimum amount that is required for you to be a successful bidder at the auction, making a purchase offer committed to the contract. So you could always overfund your down payment. You can make a bigger down payment, but in this case, Orange County, they require a minimum of 20% or $1,000 of what we call the contract price. And that's your bid amount plus the buyer's premium for a total dollar amount and then a percentage. And that percentage will be calculated for you. This is a great tool. It's going to help you be able to determine just how to make those bank checks out at the auction. If you're bringing cash, then you know how much cash you need to bring. But for those of you getting a bank or teller check, that's important. If you're coming to the auction and you bring cash, bring plenty of it. And by all means, keep it on your person. I'm not 100% sure when we hear people say after they're done bidding, yeah, I just got to go out to my truck. I have the money. We're not letting you go outside to go get money. You're not able to go to the bank to go get money. You need to have your down payment on your person. Once you leave the auction room, if we're doing in-person auctions, you're telling the auction company and the municipality you don't have money. And they've instructed us at times to just go and sell it to the other person who is bidding. So if you leave to go get money, that's your own risk. Bring plenty of money. When we talk about bank checks and official bank checks, we mean a bank check, a teller's check, a cashier's check. These are all checks that are drawn directly on the bank's bank account by the bank. So you're going in and telling them you need an official, either bank, teller, cashier check, payable to the municipality in some way. And the terms of auction specify exactly how that's supposed to happen. And these are what we call guaranteed funds. This is good money. It's money that comes out of your account into the bank's account onto their check, payable directly to treasurer of X County. Your name's not even on the check anywhere, and it's for whatever dollar amount you have it made out for. Some people get a few of these checks. My bank charges me, I think, $2 or $3. So you can get a few checks if you want to have flexibility of down payment. Let's be very clear. No municipality we work with, no county, city, town, no one accepts personal checks, no business checks, no home equity checks or lines of credit or money transfers. We've had people come and show us bank savings account statements that they have money. Not accepted. Absolutely not. The counties cannot and will not accept them as a down payment. Also, be aware that certified checks are not going to be accepted. Certified checks are not a guaranteed funds in the sense that a bank or a teller or a cashier's check is. I'm not going to teach you why not, but the bankers that I've talked to have assured me that those three forms of payment you do take are the best. So also certified checks, they've become quite expensive in the last few years. I see $25, $30, and there's no reason to spend money on that check like that. We do accept debit and credit cards. We take Visa, MasterCard, and Discover in the form of either debit or credit. So if you're going to use plastic as a down payment method, please call them before the auction date. Let them know that you intend to use your credit or debit card to buy real estate. Again, let them know that it's real estate you're buying. Most of you, and me included, not buying real estate every day on my credit card. So no matter how good your credit line is and how good your FICO score is, when we swipe your card or when we type in your data and we have to do that transaction for an immediate down payment after you're done bidding, they see real estate. The computer on their end typically says declined. And that's a real pain in the neck, not only for you who has to now get on the 800 number and call them and how much fun it is to try and reach a person, but it also slows down the checkout process. So let them know you're buying real estate, and also estimate your down payment amount. Use that calculator that we're going to give you and let you figure out, and tell them, I'm buying a piece of property. I'm going to use my credit card, likely to put $10,000, $11,000, $12,000 on my card, if that's what you're doing. And then at the end of the conversation, confirm with them that they put a note in your electronic file. Please just say, did you make a note in my file? So next week or whenever you're doing this, you're going to be approved to go and we swipe your card. Let's go over some bidding strategies. And we've seen all kinds of bidding strategy over the 20 years we've been doing this work. Some people are very methodical, like a chess player. Some people are just throwing darts on the wall. Some are nervous, like they're playing Jenga. And other people are just going to analyze and analyze and analyze and never actually bid. What makes you comfortable is up to you, but be aware that in the end, it's the high bidder that wins, and you need to be the high bidder. So we tell you to bid first, bid often, and then you'll buy it. Before I get into that, let me just ask you something. We use the country style auction method. We typically ask a dollar amount. If we don't get that dollar amount, the bid comes down lower and lower until eventually somebody puts their hand up, and then we count back in the upward direction again. If I'm selling a brand new crisp $100 bill, would you give me $100 for it? Anybody here give me $100 for my $100 bill? But would you give me $80 for it? Would you give me $80 for it? And I see a couple of people are still kind of thinking about it. But would you give me $50 for $100? Well, sure, I see. Joe says, yep, right now, meet you outside. Obviously, $50 for $100 value, pretty much everybody would do that. But you really expect it to get down to $1? You know, everybody would want it then. And then it's a bidding frenzy. And then what you've done is you've actually gotten people interested in the asset who may not have even cared to buy it before. We've seen this happen time and time again. People come to buy, but they sit on their bid card and wait for it to get so low that they feel like, oh, wow, this is such a steal. There's no stealing at auction. Condition determines everything, and there's always enough buyers that are interested. But what you do by waiting is you allow people who are remotely interested, who this was their fourth or fifth or eighth choice, to say, well, heck, at that price, I'm in. And they raise their bid card or they push their bid button. So our advice is don't wait to bid. Waiting means you always pay more, because by the time you decide to get in, you have to outbid the previous bidder. That could have been you. Bidding delays don't work. You know, waiting to raise your card to try and slow things down or wait to push the button, you're not controlling anything. If anything, we've seen you upset other bidders who then are determined to not let you have it. And they're going to keep bidding. So, you know, there's a lot of psychology going on at the auction and people trying to control with their bid card what's happening. Only two people in control at the auction. One, the control of the auction is the auctioneer with the microphone because they're doing the bid chanting. But more importantly, you, the buyers, who are raising your hand with real money to be the buyer. You're in control. And you're just going to have to outbid somebody in the end. So don't delay. And strength wins. You know, when I practiced the opening round of bidding there, selling that land, you may have noticed that at one point the bidding was, you know, 12.5 and 15,000, and somebody jumped the bid to 15,000. Instead of going 13.5 or 14, they actually jumped ahead a couple of increments. And we've seen that happen where people have jumped the bid and then end up scaring other people away, if you will, because of their strength. And then they get it at that value and they're pretty happy about it because that's the amount they bid and they didn't have to bid more. So what do we mean by choice to the high bidder? When we offer a property, sometimes 3, 4, 5 at a time, we offer property choice to the highest bidder. Here was an example I hope makes sense to you. When you're in the market for fruit, do you want one fruit, one type of fruit, or are you interested in making a fruit salad where you need a bunch of fruit together? So when we look at properties, sometimes the county directs us or we suggest to them that they should offer property choice to the high bidder. And here's a perfect example. Here are 2 vacant tracts of land. They touch, they're contiguous, they're adjacent. They're almost identical in size. They're 100 by almost 100 each. And does it make sense to sell these individually, or does it make sense to just sell them to the highest bidder and let the bidder choose what they want? And the reason why I'm going to say this, I hope you can see my mouse on the screen. This vacant land might be very interesting to this homeowner who would like both of these. It may also be interested to this owner who only wants one of them. It may be interested to this person who wants to extend their property. If we had to sell these one at a time, which one should go first? We typically are selling in a numerical tax map ascending order. So the wrong one, if you will, may come first for some buyers. When properties are very similar, we sell them choice to the high bidder. So we would put these both on the auction block at the same time. The high bidder gets to choose. So we go through the bidding increments, we reach a high bidder, we note the backup bidder, and then we say to the high bidder, do you want them both? Very often the high bidder says, yep, I'll take both. That means they're buying 2 at 2 times their bid. Sometimes the high bidder says, no, Frank, I only want one. I'll take parcel number 2 in that upper right corner. That's what I really wanted. and they just pay for one property. We typically then go and ask the other bidder who is right behind them and say, do you want the other one? And sometimes that works out. They're interested in the other property and they take it at their bid. Occasionally, we have to rebid the property that neither one of those people wanted. That's choice to the high bidder. Next, we'll do combination bids. This is where the counties tell us, sell property that's contiguous and that is even mixed shapes and sizes, but they're contiguous. Sell them to the highest bidder, all for one bid, all for one money. Mostly it's two properties together. In this example, three. And it could be 4 or 5 properties, but typically 2 to 3. And here's the reason why this went as a combo parcel, all for one money. Look at the aerial photo on the left. And you notice way here on the left is where the actual roadway is. So you have this piece, and then you have 2 more behind it. Now let's look over at the tax map. You have this piece, and here's the 2 pieces behind it. If we were to just sell you this piece first, the access to these 2 pieces may really become in jeopardy, and they may not actually have any access to the road. Now, some of you are saying, well, wait, Frank, what about this guy over here? That looks like a driveway, 25 by 375. You're right, but it's not owned by you, so you may not have any right to use that. This property up here doesn't look like it touches anything on a roadway. So it too may have no actual access point. So the county in this case said to us, we have all 3 pieces. Yes, this one is, dimensional. These are acreages. Just put them all together and let the buyer decide, do they want to keep them all together or do they want to keep them apart, maybe sell a piece to a neighbor, maybe keep them both together. It's up to them. So we would go through a bidding sequence where the high bidder just gets it all for one money. And you'll get a deed that actually lists all 3 separate tax identification properties, parcels. There was a quick question that popped up on who creates the deed. Our software will print for the county their legal quitclaim deed, and then we embed all the information we've gathered in our computer system so the county can quickly file that deed. So that's combination. Combo as one. Wouldn't you love to have this property, especially now in the summer when it's hot and you can go out and visit that property and have a good time. If you have a boat, and if you have a parachute. This property may not have road frontage. I'm going to guarantee it doesn't have road frontage. So why is that important? Well, you have to get to your property some way. Some people use the word landlocked. Landlocked is a somewhat legal description. I'm not an attorney. I'm not trying to teach you law, but I can say this. New York State does not recognize the word landlocked. So we use a phrase, may not have road frontage. New York State says that every property owner has a right to get to their property. And we'll show you how that happens here in just a second. Just look at this example of what I'm calling a typical property without road frontage. If you look at the big map there on the left, and we highlighted the property so you can see it easily, it kind of looks like a subdivision, any old subdivision with roads running around and other properties. I zoomed in on it closer so you can see it's bordered by ivy and Arbutus Road. It doesn't look like a property that doesn't have road frontage. Well, until you look at it in the satellite and you take an overhead view. This is the property. It's clearly out in the woods. And there's your ivy and Arbutus Roads as they were contemplated in that subdivision. So what happened here typically is a developer, a subdivider, bought a tract of land, subdivided it in preparation for subdivision development, but eventually lost it for non-payment of tax. So the county is selling this portion of this subdivision. Maybe these were lots that were sold to other people. I don't know. I don't want to make the story difficult, but the county foreclosed on this piece and they're selling it. And maybe someday when this property actually gets roads, you know, you'll be able to go visit that property and there may be some deeded access rights on how you can get the property. But right now, this property has no actual road frontage. So you're going to say, well, how do I get to my land? Property with road frontage is pretty easy. You know, there's a way to get to it and it touches the road and everybody's happy. You're going to want to go and look at the deeds and understand in the deed what that property gets in terms of either access, like a right-of-way, a deeded right-of-way, or are you getting an easement? Again, I'm not an attorney. I'm not trying to teach you law, but let's cover maybe the basics of what these mean. A deeded right-of-way allows you to make access to your property and use it as a passage without actually taking possession or ownership of the land you go over. So typically a right-of-way, you see people creating a driveway over somebody else's land to get to their land. And this is going to be embedded in the deed. That's a right that comes with the deed, and it's going to be, once it's in the deed, it stays there in perpetuity. You might want a legal advice or a professional like a surveyor or somebody that you're comfortable with reading the deed to help you understand this better. You may also find that you have an easement. An easement is a different type of right-of-way. This is a right to use the land, again, without possessing or owning it, and you're just going over somebody else's property. Where do we see this happen? Lakefront property. You know, you have a property that you bought that's off the lake. Somebody else's property is in between yours and the lake. But in your deed, there's an easement that says you have a right to 10 feet along the wall, along the stone wall to access the lake. And that's actually embedded right in your deed. And that's where you can go over that property. You can't build a road or pave a driveway, but you're going to be able to actually traverse it in some fashion. So there's much more to this than just what we're covering here, but if you're reading deeds and you see ROW, a right-of-way or easement, know that that's a good thing. You hope that's in your deed or in your Schedule A, part of the deed that gives you the actual description of the boundary of the property. Just a few final thoughts. I see we're heading to that hour, and we want to try and be right around that right time. You know, again, at the auction, if you're bidding in person or if you're going to bid from home online, get in the bidding sequence early. Get in right from the beginning, because then you don't have to be the last person jumping on the wagon train. You're already in the bidding sequence. And as other people drop away, you'll get it at your price, and typically one bid less than what you would have had to spend to be the last person bidding if you jump in late. Also, know where you want to go and let's get there. If you think you're going to pay $10,000 and the bidding starts at $3,000 or $2,000, start marching along as quickly as you can with some strength. We're not advising that you go from $2,000 to $10,000. Obviously, if you can save a few dollars, you'd like to do that. But try and get to an area where you're comfortable buying the property and try and outbid the other people pretty quickly. People get a sense of strength, whether it's in person at the auction, like this person jumping up and down happy, or people pressing the button at home as the bids change quickly. It's demoralizing if you are a person who are trying to get it for $2,000 if the bidding rapidly goes to 3, 4, 5, 6. And the best strength is don't be afraid to actually jump the bid. If the auctioneer is looking for an increase of X dollars, don't be afraid to jump that amount even higher. And you might say to yourself, Frank, come on, why do I want to just spend extra money? That's something you're going to have to be comfortable with. It's a bidding strategy that wins. We see people that do jump the bid, sometimes in a significant amount, that actually then just demoralize the other bidders, and they put their hands down, and there you go. It's going to be your property. So when you're looking into property, visit with an attorney, tax professional, understand your finances, know what you're supposed to do to be able to be a buyer. The attorney advice, we're just going to suggest that if you speak with your attorney that you've been dealing with maybe a while, you're comfortable with them, and now you bring to them, I want to buy Article 11 property tax foreclosure, and they tell you, forget it, don't even talk about it. You may want to seek another opinion for this type of purchase. This is something that most people on the attorney side don't deal with every day. They're not aware of the Article 11 foreclosure process, and they're not comfortable with it, so they may not recommend that you participate. I'll share with you that in our 20 years, we've put 40,000 properties back on the tax-paying rolls. And every year we're selling 1,000 properties or more, sometimes to people we see over and over again, who like to buy property, invest in property, develop, flip, sell, live in it. They understand these properties, and they're very happy to come and buy them. They're also an informed buyer. An educated buyer is our best buyer, and being educated about what you're buying is very important. So get good advice, get good information, but do your homework. Preparing for auction and bidding strategy, we hope we answered all of your questions tonight. I know Jenny in the background was doing a great job answering questions. There was a whole bunch of them there. Yvette in our office, Jessica in our office did a great job getting the down payment calculator together, getting our survey questions ready to send you tonight, and help make this presentation hopefully something that you felt was of value and important to help you become very comfortable to be able to participate in these auctions going forward. From there, I'm going to ask Jenny if she wants to turn on her mic and maybe bring a couple of questions forward that we didn't really cover tonight, but that should be before we get off.
Hi, Frank. I actually was able to answer everything through the chat and on the Q&A. If anyone has any additional questions, you can certainly send them over and we can go over them live if you'd like.
Yeah, we'll stay here with you. We want to, again, respect your time. Some people, told the family they'll be here an hour and that's about it. So, we definitely want to do that for you. So can you pay partially by teller's check and the balance by credit card? That's something that can happen at the auction. We have a way to mix money. So if we're having an in-person auction and you're able to do that, you can certainly do that. We're going to cover next week the participation of the online auction and how that's going to happen. So let me leave that for a more detailed explanation next week. What else? Anything else? How much do you know to bring a cashier's check? Well, that's why we came up with that down payment calculator. So the down payment calculator is going to help you specifically know right in the municipality you're looking at. Of course, it's one of the municipalities we work with. So we know already what their down payment requirements are as a minimum. You know, we don't know, you know the maximum you would pay for that property. So type in your maximum amount and you'll find out your maximum down, your down payment, the minimum down payment you'll need to bid that maximum amount. And then what we're going to suggest to you is if you're weak in the knees, bring a second check with a little bit more money, just in case you bid a little bit more. So where does the bidding begin? Bidding begins from the floor, from you bidding. The auctioneer is asking, but we are not looking at any past taxes. Nobody cares about that at the auction. The county doesn't care about that at the auction. We're looking to sell to the highest bidder for whatever the value may be today at the auction, so that the county ends up with a new taxpayer, somebody who is going to go and use this property, enjoy it, and be a responsible taxpayer going forward. So no minimum starting bid. That's not something that we do routinely, and you'll be a happy buyer. What else do we have? Who actually pays the back taxes? That's something that the county is going to absorb and, you know, use the monies from the tax auction to help offset that. But in the end, if there is a shortfall in taxes, it may be something that you, me, and the rest of the taxpayers are actually going to pitch in next time. When our tax bill goes up a few dollars, it's going to take into account past taxes maybe that weren't collected.
Frank,
yes.
Can you explain how the online and live portions work together?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. So typically our auctions are live in a ballroom and online at the same time. So if you're in the ballroom, you're bidding with that bid card, the way we were showing it to you before, and you're just bidding like, you know, everybody's in the room with you, including the online bidders. The online bidders are all going to be funneled into our online bidding clerk, who then relays your bid into the audience as if you were there. So when they get a high bid on the computer, that bid clerk is typically saying, yep, yes, bid, you know, letting the auctioneer know that there is a bid and the increment goes up again. So it's very simultaneous. The bidding in the crowd obviously is happening at its own speed. The bidding from home online is happening within a fraction of a second of real time. We do not use video for the home feed of the auction. There's nothing for you to see. You can hear the auctioneer, so you can hear what's going on and hear the bidding amounts, but video slows down the internet just too much, and it wouldn't be productive for you to actually see the auction. Are there downsides to bidding online? Generally, no. You know, if we have people bidding online because they can't take off work that day or they can't attend the auction from a distance. But what's the risk? One of the risks would be your computer decides to do a Windows update right when you go to bid. And, you know, oops, that happened. So you might not be able to. Maybe there's a disconnection of some sort of the internet, or, you know, we had an instance here at home where one of my sons working from home decided to unplug the router and plug in a new one. I mean, everybody went ballistic in the middle of our work. So it's a lot more fun to be in person. Whether or not we're actually going to be able to be in person this fall, we're not sure yet. But it's equally as fun online, and we intend to have live auctioneer bid calling online when we do our online auctions too, if that's how we're going to do that. Question on the buyer's premium. We're going to talk about this again a little bit more next week as we get into the terms of the auction. So the buyer's premium is the commission paid by the buyer on top of their bid. So it's the compensation for the auctioneers and auction team based on your purchase of the property. We'll go over that in much greater detail in the next webinar. Maybe I need to hit refresh on my webinar chat just to make sure I see all the questions. Are closing costs separate? Yes, they are. The closing costs are usually defined pretty well in the county terms of the auction. You know, what the actual clerk's fee might be, or the recording fee, and we have a description in there on the transfer tax for New York State. But keep in mind, these transactions are completely done from the county side, including the generation of the deed. So whether or not you need an attorney is just your own preference. We sell thousands of properties to people who never use their attorney to do anything in the transaction. The deed is created by the municipality. They file it in the clerk's office. You get a copy in the mail. Once that deed is recorded in your name, it's your property. So it's up to you to decide whether you want, legal hand-holding through the closing process. And the closing process is actually no sit-down closing. I'll mention that now. This is typically through the mail, or you've gone to the county and made your last payment. Many people just send them their final bank check and then wait for the deed in the mail. There's no actual sit-down face-to-face closing. Any others you see, Jen? So can you go into the property after the auction or after you finish paying? I'm going to answer this as neither. You can only go in the property after you pay, after the auction, after it's been recorded as the deed in your name. It is not your property until the deed is recorded. So even if you at the auction paid totally in full, there's not a penny to be left owed, you still did not buy the property. The county needs to, one, take a look and make sure you are not a delinquent taxpayer in that county. They're not going to sell property to a delinquent taxpayer who owes them money currently. So that's why there's usually a couple of days process to get what we call an approval of the bid. They're not looking at the dollar amounts. They're making sure that we're not selling property to people who owe taxes. And then the deed actually needs to be printed. Once the county tells us, yep, everybody at the auction is good, print the deeds, we print them, we FedEx them to them. And as long as your final payment is in, they're going to be able to walk over to the clerk's office and get that entered into the public record. Then it's your property. So even though typically there's a 30-day window for closing, many people are finding that they're actually taking title much sooner. Great questions.
Frank, you were taking questions from the chat room while I was answering questions in the Q&A section.
Okay.
I think there was one question. It says, if I registered to bid online, can I bid in person if I decided to go in? I don't think you answered that one.
I didn't. You want to answer it, Jen?
Absolutely. If you can register online. We've had people attend the auction that have registrations online and for in person, and that's if all of a sudden they need to leave, they can still participate, say on their phone or a tablet. If you register online and then all of a sudden have the day free, you can certainly come into the auction and participate live. You just need to get a paddle once you come into the location.
Yeah, exactly. Our system really allows you to be very flexible, and it's important that we have that built into our system so that you can bid right off your phone if you want to. I see one question here about evictions and occupied property. So if we have occupied property, that's not something that we typically show you because we don't visit property indoors that are occupied. And you may be buying a property that by the time you take title may still be occupied. It may not be occupied. They may have moved out when we put the sign on the property. They may have moved out the day of the auction. There are a whole bunch of scenarios, but just understand that none of the municipalities that we work with actually do evictions. So if a property is occupied, if it gets to that point, that's going to be something you as the buyer will need to address. That said, we have buyers that only want occupied property. To them, it's instant income property. It's instant rental property without having to do anything. Somebody's already there. They want to pay rent to someone, and they love occupied property. So it's just a matter of what your preference is. If you have to do an eviction, that's done through the sheriff's department. You could do it on your own. Once you take title to the property, visit the sheriff's department, or you can hire an attorney to help you with that. Jen, I think we'll shut it down for the evening. I want to say thank you to everyone who came and spent the evening with us. We really appreciate your time. I hope this was of something of value to you and you learned from. I know you're going to love the down payment calculator. It's an excellent tool. I've been using it since we've come out with it, and I think it's fascinating and it really works well. It's going to definitely save a lot of confusion. And please feel free to answer our survey that comes out. It's only 4 or 5 questions. We would love to have some feedback, know how we can improve and make this better for you. And hopefully you signed up next week for the final part of this 3-week series where we're going to get a little bit further into the terms and conditions of the actual auction and walk you through the registration process. Thank you again for being with us tonight, and stay safe and healthy.